The phrase, "the child is the father of the man," often makes us look back at early influences that shape greatness, and in Hollywood history few stories reflect that idea more intriguingly than the creative legacy of Joseph L. Mankiewicz and his brother Herman. Together they helped shape the language of classic cinema, building reputations that still echo through film history, even if not always loudly remembered today. Joseph L. Mankiewicz was not just a writer or a director. He was both, a rare dual talent who helped define the sharp, intelligent storytelling style of early Hollywood. Alongside his brother Herman J. Mankiewicz, he became part of a creative force that influenced the golden age of studio filmmaking. Herman helped shape landmark works like Citizen Kane, while Joseph carved his own path with a distinct voice that blended wit, sophistication, and emotional depth. For years, Joseph built a reputation as a meticulous and highly skilled filmmaker. His dialogue was known for being sharp, elegant, and deeply human. He reached the peak of his career with extraordinary achievements, winning multiple Academy Awards for films such as A Letter to Three Wives and All About Eve, a rare accomplishment that placed him among the most respected storytellers of his time. Yet behind the success there was also pressure. In an industry defined by constant competition, comparisons with his brother were unavoidable. Some observers believed that quiet rivalry between them pushed Joseph to continually prove himself, driving both brilliance and internal strain. Hollywood, after all, rarely allowed space for shared legacy without tension. His career, however, was not without setbacks. One of the most talked about moments came with the production of Cleopatra, a massive and costly production that spiraled into one of the most infamous financial challenges in studio history. Though the film eventually achieved recognition, its troubled production period cast a long shadow over those involved, including Mankiewicz, who had taken on the enormous task of shaping its narrative. Despite his earlier triumphs, the difficulties surrounding the project marked a turning point. The pressures of such a high-profile production, combined with industry expectations, left a lasting emotional impact. In later years he became more reflective about his journey, acknowledging both the brilliance of his achievements and the weight of his disappointments. And yet, even with the ups and downs, his influence on cinema remained undeniable. From the transition of silent films into talkies, to the rise of sophisticated dialogue-driven storytelling, Joseph Mankiewicz helped elevate film into a more literary and character-focused art form. His work turned cinema into something more than entertainment. It became a space for thought, emotion, and layered human behavior. Still, questions remain. Why do some towering figures fade from popular memory despite their contributions? Why do certain names dominate the spotlight while others, equally important, become quieter footnotes in history? Perhaps that is the real paradox of Hollywood, where legacy is not only built on success, but also on how loudly the world chooses to remember it. Career into one of the most exhausting chapters of his life. The production of Cleopatra was never just a film shoot, it became a full-scale industry crisis. According to long-told stories, the project initially began under director Ruben Mamoulian, but almost immediately ran into serious trouble. The challenges were everywhere. Uncertain filming locations, unstable script drafts, and constant disagreements over how the story should even be told. Then the situation turned critical. Lead actress Elizabeth Taylor became seriously ill during production, with rumors at the time suggesting her condition was life-threatening. Filming halted, schedules collapsed, and the entire production was thrown into uncertainty. It was at this breaking point that Joseph L. Mankiewicz stepped in, brought in because of his rare ability to both rewrite scripts and direct under pressure, exactly what the project desperately needed. What followed was a complete reconstruction of the film while it was still being made. Mankiewicz didn't simply continue the production, he reshaped it. Scenes were rewritten, story structure was reworked, and the entire production was moved to Rome, adding massive logistical strain. Every change increased costs, and every delay pushed the studio closer to financial danger. The film began to evolve far beyond its original plan, becoming larger, longer, and far more complicated than anyone had anticipated. As production continued, another unexpected shift changed everything again. Richard Burton replaced Stephen Boyd as Mark Antony, and his on-screen chemistry with Taylor quickly spilled into real life. Their relationship became one of the most talked-about scandals in Hollywood at the time, drawing constant media attention. Instead of the film being the main focus, the romance surrounding it began dominating headlines. Behind the camera, the pressure on Mankiewicz was relentless. He was rewriting dialogue at night, filming during the day, and constantly adjusting scenes to keep the production moving. The workload was so intense that insiders often described the set as unpredictable, plans changed daily, and no one was fully certain what the final structure would look like until scenes were actually filmed. The financial situation worsened as the project expanded. What had begun as a controlled production turned into one of the most expensive films ever made. The original cut reportedly stretched to nearly 5 hours, forcing major restructuring to make it suitable for release. At one point, the financial strain became so severe that the studio was pushed to the edge of crisis, even selling significant assets to stay afloat. By the time filming ended, Mankiewicz had spent years of his life trapped inside a production that had grown beyond anyone's control. Though he played a crucial role in saving it from collapse, he ultimately lost control over the final cut, something that deeply affected him in the aftermath. When Cleopatra was finally released, it stood as both a cinematic spectacle and a cautionary tale. Lavish, ambitious, and visually stunning, it also symbolized excess, pressure, and the cost of uncontrolled filmmaking. Critics were divided, but the film still managed to achieve strong box office returns and secure its place in cinema history. For Mankiewicz, however, the experience remained personal. It marked a turning point, one where immense creative effort collided with exhaustion, compromise, and reflection. Despite the chaos, his reputation as a master storyteller and one of Hollywood's most intelligent filmmakers endured. And in the broader history of cinema, Cleopatra remains not just a film, but a reminder of how ambition, artistry, and production pressure can merge into something both extraordinary and overwhelming at the same time. Suggests that he lived in the long shadow of that comparison, constantly trying to establish an identity separate from his brother while still operating in the same creative world. It wasn't just family connection, it became a quiet professional tension that followed him through the early stages of his career. Joseph L. Mankiewicz ultimately proved himself through persistence and skill, carving out a reputation that stood firmly on its own. His writing style became instantly recognizable, elegant, witty, and layered with emotional intelligence. Even when Hollywood was shifting rapidly in tone and style, he remained committed to character-driven storytelling and sharp dialogue. Despite his success, however, he was never entirely comfortable with the way fame defined him. Colleagues often described him as someone more interested in craft than celebrity, preferring thoughtful conversation over industry spectacle. He worked closely with many major figures of classic cinema, including directors like Alfred Hitchcock, John Ford, Billy Wilder, and Frank Capra, all of whom shaped different branches of Hollywood storytelling. His ability to move between roles, writer, director, producer, made him one of the most versatile figures of his time. Over the course of his career, he contributed to more than 60 films, many of which still stand as examples of refined studio-era filmmaking. Yet, as the industry evolved, some of his earlier works began to fade from mainstream attention, remembered more by critics and film historians than by general audiences. There were also personal complexities that followed him through his career. Stories from Hollywood's golden age often linked him socially with well-known actresses of the time, reflecting the tightly connected and highly social nature of the studio system. Figures such as Loretta Young, Joan Crawford, and Rutherford, Linda Darnell, and Judy Garland were part of the broader Hollywood circle he moved within. These relationships, often discussed in biographies and memoirs, reflected the intense social environment of classic studio-era filmmaking rather than simple headlines. Mankiewicz himself once reflected on how dramatically Hollywood had changed, suggesting that the industry of his early years felt almost unrecognizable compared to later decades. It was a world shaped by strict studio control, intense creative pressure, and tightly managed public images, very different from the modern entertainment landscape. At the same time, his legacy continued to be defined by his craftsmanship. He had a rare ability to combine intelligence with entertainment, making films that were both accessible and deeply thoughtful. This balance is what earned him lasting respect among filmmakers, even if wider public recognition shifted over time. And when viewed as a whole, his career tells a larger story, not just of success or controversy, but of a filmmaker trying to maintain artistic identity in an industry that was constantly reinventing itself. For a long time, audiences and even parts of the industry didn't fully separate Joseph L. Mankiewicz from the towering legacy of his older brother Herman J. Mankiewicz. Because both worked deeply within Hollywood's creative system, their names often blurred together in public memory. But as Herman's life came to an early end at the age of 55, a clearer picture of Joseph's individual talent began to emerge, allowing him to step out of that shared shadow and be recognized on his own terms. Some film historians even suggest that for a time, Hollywood struggled to make space for both Mankiewicz brothers at once. In practice, Herman became the earlier legend, while Joseph was often seen as a continuation of that creative lineage, until his own achievements firmly redefined him as a master in his own right. His breakthrough into lasting recognition came through a remarkable run of films in the late 1940s and early 1950s. One of his early successes, The Ghost and Mrs. Muir, showed his growing command of mood, character, and emotional storytelling. He followed it with A Letter to Three Wives, a film that earned him widespread critical acclaim and multiple major awards, firmly establishing his reputation as one of Hollywood's most intelligent storytellers. Then came the defining triumph of his career, All About Eve. Starring Bette Davis, the film became a landmark in cinema history. It received an extraordinary number of Academy Award nominations and won several major categories, including Best Picture. With its sharp dialogue, layered characters, and behind-the-scenes look at ambition in the theater world, it confirmed Mankiewicz as one of the most sophisticated voices in Hollywood filmmaking. Professionally, his success placed him at the very top of the industry. But his personal life was just as complex and layered. He was married 3 times, and later found stability and companionship in his third marriage to Rosemary Matthews, an English woman connected to a prominent British family with ties to the era of King George V. His career also marked a new level of creative control when he was given the opportunity to direct for 20th Century Fox, beginning with The Keys of the Kingdom. In addition to directing, he also worked as writer and producer on the project, demonstrating the full range of his cinematic skill. Around this time, he collaborated with figures such as Nunnally Johnson and continued to build a reputation for precision-driven storytelling. By the time of his later years, Mankiewicz had firmly secured his place as one of Hollywood's most respected filmmakers. When he passed away in 1993, just days before his 84th birthday, it marked the end of an era, closing the chapter on a career that had quietly shaped the language of modern cinema. Looking back, his story is not just about awards or famous films. It's about recognition, how one artist can be hidden in the shadow of another, only to later emerge as a defining voice of an entire industry.